Hey geeks, welcome back to the series of videos where we are going to learn or we are learning all about JWT concept by hands-on. So theoretical aspect already done. We are right now in our trying to understand the third article of this series. So we have written three articles. First part introduction, second part node server, third part is React application building. In this part we have already went through understanding that what we are going to build this UI in the previous video. Right now we're going to have a tour of the code inside the root folder of this repo, and then we will try to understand some basic high level wrappers in the React application which will provide the data to the child components. And then after that, in the next video we will be learning what is all this children's which will build the 4 pages we have discussed earlier. So let's try to understand what is our npm packages involved. So if you see, this is the when you clone this is the all if you expand all of the folders, you will see this all components and source code will be looking inside that source code after cloning. But if I just try to explain this with you, that what it contains inside this package.json, what are the dependency we are using, that should be easier. So material UI, if you see, this is just for we are not using any advanced level CSS, and we are not going to learn CSS. So I just use this material UI so that we will not spend much time on CSS stuffs. So you can simply use the material UI, and you don't even have to do, because everything is involved in this is already given to this dependency list, so you don't need to worry about that. It will automatically get installed and it will be working fine, so don't worry about that. I just giving this idea that what I have used for the UI as a UI framework. Now let's try to understand what is the next package. So this is testing. We will ignore it because this is, we are not writing any unit testing, so we will be ignoring this. Axios is the package, npm package we are using for calling the our server endpoints. So we, as a front-end developer, we need to call the server endpoints, right? For that I'm using Axios. Why Axios? Because Axios has lot of extra features available and easy to use. I like that, so I'm using it. If you don't like, you can use anything you want. That's up to you. React and React DOM, you know, this is the basic part of React application that you utilize it. If you just go through this here, React is just the ultimate UI library for front-end, and yes, the ultimate, you heard it right. And for routing or navigation, we are using React Router DOM. So if you go to this one is used for routing. If you remember, we are also going to create navigation bar, right? So that navigation bar requires this routing thing. Now React scripts, Web Vital, these are just you can ignore them. You don't need to understand that because this is not required for you or for this tutorial. It is something else. Now this is just a script we are using. At port 3002 we are running our React application. That's it, nothing else to understand here. Let's jump back to here and let's try to understand the root folder, what it is containing and how. So if you see inside this root folder, when I say root folder, this one is the root folder where this ignore file. So we are ignoring node modules. We are ignoring basically this yeah, PNP, and PNP is not existing, but this comes by default. So at least node modules comes by default, so we are good on that, so you don't need to care on that. Let's jump directly to understand. Okay, you already know that what is locked file. It's just locking the version which got installed to run this app, right? That version gets locked in this file. Now readme file, we have already went through that how we are installing, so we are done with. Let's try to understand the root files inside this source directory. This is very important. This is the file where everything starts in React application. So this is the entry point, I would say, in the React application where you will start all the application. If you see, this is the app component we are here trying to render in this component. So this must be our start, right? So let's try to go to this. So first I want to understand, let me just go to this Authcontext, Authwrapper, my app. If I just try to understand, where is that? I'm just looking for one wrapper here, my app bar, and then app wrapper. So we'll go through all of the components here we are loading, but okay, let's first understand some other stuffs here. If you go to article, let's follow the article, what article is explaining. Article is trying to explain some basic stuff. So we will come to app.json, app.js file later on. So index.js we have already went through. Let's try to understand indexes. So basic CSS stuff, you can I think you will be able to understand it so easily, so no need to explain. This is just for the basic UI, giving UI a look. Now, not found, this is the page we will be this is the component where we will be loading it when you type something else in the route. When I say route, I mean this one. When you type something, let's say, which don't even exist here, then you will see this page. So this is not found, right? So this gets rendered by this component. Now coming to our another error fallback. So let's say some code got broken due to some unknown reason which we don't know. In that case, we should not be showing any error to the user, right? For that, we are showing this one as a fallback UI. So this will say that something went wrong, and this will be the similar component like this, just the message will be different. Okay, we'll learn that. Now error boundary is the one which is handling this error fallback. So error boundary inside React application is still is a class component. There is no hook available for that. You can learn it what I just said if you are not already aware on that. So here if you see error fall, this is the component responsible to catch any error in the application if it is, and then load a UI. And which UI? This error fallback UI which we are loading here. So it's saying that if there is something error, you load this error fallback. That's why we created this error fallback component, so that we can load that here. So we are good with error boundary, we are good with error fallback, we are good with not found, report web vitals. This is kind of very different stuffs. In case of React, we don't need to learn it. Setup test is again unit test related stuffs, we are ignoring that. Now coming to fallback is done. App wrapper we need to understand. Yes, private route we need to understand. So private route is very important here to understand. So this is the route where which we are defining, like some pages will be accessible without logging, some pages will not be accessible without logging, right? So this is the private route component we have created, which will make sure that any application which any route which is inside this will have to go through a login process. So let's say you have built multiple pages. Let's say 2 pages is very open to all of the users without login. Anonymous loggers login will be available, but there is 2 more pages which you have built should be secured and should only be accessible via login. In that case, what we will be doing is we will simply wrap that component, or which will be the secured component, with this private route component, and that's how we will be securing our page for logged in user. So this is I will explain what is this auth context later on. Let's try to understand that this is just the this context. If you know about context in React application, please if you don't know about the React context already, please go and learn it and then come back. But I will explain the use auth context, what is built there. Basically for our case, what we are doing is we are storing some authentication related data to the context for the application, so that we can use it anywhere in the application from a global data point of view. So that's some people use Redux, some people nowadays shifting to this context API in the React application. So this is very cool. You don't need to have multiple libraries like in case of your Redux requirement, you have a lot of setups to do. But in case of context API, you don't need to set those things. So it's easier to use, and you don't need to this Redux and context API both solve the same problem. you don't need to prop deal for every data so that it will be available to the child component. So so go and learn it, and when you are done with, let's try to understand right now. So let's say in this says that whether it will check whether this is logged in or not. So when you log in, this context will set that whether user is logged in or not, and this data information will be available to this auth state whether user is logged in or not, and that's what we are checking here when something is wrapped inside that some component wrapped inside private route. So when people will try to reach to that private route component, then user will have to check this, that whether this login user is logged in or not. If user is logged in, then whatever the child component is there, you just load that, else you simply redirect the user to login page. That's it, right? If I just want to show you demo, so if I just click here, this is the what you say that this is the secured page which is wrapped inside router, what router? Private route component. Since it is a secure page and user is not logged in, user is redirected to login page, and that's why you are able to see this. When user is logged in with this, user will be able to go to this tab. Let's try to do that right now. So if you do that, this portion of the code will be running, which means that any child which is inside this private route wrapped will be loaded in after that if it is logged in. So this I am just logging in. If you go to this page, it's logged in, right? Alright guys, so we are done with this understanding of private route. So I hope you understood this. Now let's try to understand app wrapper here. App wrapper is okay, I just named it differently. The page name is app wrapper, but actually it is the component we are defining it Authwrapper. Why it is Authwrapper? Actually this is Authwrapper because we want to make sure that this Authwrapper will have all the data related to authentication and will be available to all the components inside this application. That's the wrapper. So we will be wrapping all of the components inside this component so that we don't need to pass data to each one of the component by prop dealing process. This Authwrapper will be simply utilized and will wrap all of the components in as a child component, and since we are using contexts, we don't need to prop drill here, and automatically this all data will be available to all the application. We will go to understand how we are wrapping it. Let's try to understand what this Authwrapper actually right now here. So Authwrapper is just a component which takes a child component so that those child component will have the available whatever the context we are defining, the data we are defining, those children will have the data required. How we are doing that? It's very simple. What I'm doing is I'm just creating a context. We'll understand what this context while trying to understand login, but let's try to understand, just give it a thought right now that how this context is created, right? What is context? You already know, right? It's just the way you want to provide data to other components. Since we will be learning in our separate maybe coming in the next videos, let's try to understand this Authwrapper for now. So this auth context we have, which will provide the two setter and getter. This is like setter and this is getter, authentication related, right? This is helping us to set the authentication data for the application, as well as provide the authentication data to the application. That's why setter and getter we are getting from this use auth context. Don't worry, we will learn what is use auth context later on. This use effect is will be running when the app gets initiated, and in that case what we are doing is simple. We are just using local storage. You remember why we are using local storage? Just to store the access token, right? Now we have this local storage. We will first check that whether this hacker user local storage key available inside local storage or not. If this is not null, which means that there is some token available inside that local storage, or if it is not defined, then only we are saying that, hey, login is true, JWT key, you can set this authentication data for the whole application, and these are some required, like whether this is new register or app wrapping load, whether app is still loading or not. We are making because user is already logged in, so we're making the app loading false, and this is registered is false because we'll understand what this is. This is while trying to understand register component. Don't worry on that. So mainly these two are right now important to understand, that this login is true because we have right now something inside our local storage. If something inside local storage, we are saying that user is logged in. Just mark this word, note this down. But you may be asking, Javed, what if the token is expired? That we are handling in separate case. So for now, just try to understand that the concept here is, if the token is present in local storage, which means that we are saying that user is logged in. Okay, that's how we are doing that. We are just setting this variable is login with true value and JWT key with this value present inside the local storage. That's how this whole variable, these two main variable, are available throughout the application to check whether user is logged in or not. Okay, now coming to the else part, if this is not logged in, then what we are doing is, whatever previous data is there, you make it as it is. So we are keeping it all previous data as it is, and of course these are false every time. Now this circular progress, if you see, while Authwrapper is getting initiated by above use effect. So this use effect will be initiating first when user is, let's say, reloading the page. When user has reloaded the whole application, this use effect will get active, and this will try to run this code inside that. While this is running, we are showing the circular progress. If you see, I'm not sure if I'm logged on or not. See this circular progress we are showing to user while this is getting loaded. And when I say loaded, I mean these all stuffs are happening behind the scene. So that's why this loading is there. Once that is loaded, children will be rendered, and that children is nothing but the top hacker component, which we will learn later on. So I hope you understand that what this app wrapper is doing. This app wrapper is doing nothing. It's just setting the authentication data for the whole application. Okay. Now let's try to understand that how this is available. This data is available to be utilized inside the application. That we are defining here. See Authwrapper. I will simply zoom out for you guys so that you will be able to understand it better. So it's a very small component, I would say. So this app wrapper is where everything is happening. Like first, everything starts from here, right? So first, when you load this application first time, this application when it loads first time, it goes through this step by step. So that's the heart of the application, that how it gets, what it will be rendering, and all routing and everything is handled inside this app.js, all data available. So if you see, error boundary is starting component, where every other component or child component to this error boundary. Why it is that? Because anything happens to this anything inside this nested child components, that will be captured inside this error boundary, and instead of throwing error, showing the error to the user, it will show a proper error page for the user. That's why it is the parent component. The auth provider, as I said, we need a component. That component should provide all the authentication related data, which we just learned here, right? This is the wrapper which is setting all the context. That is let me just try to, I was wrong, sorry. This auth, actually eventually these are same. So what I'm just trying to say is, this Authcontext in anyhow will be used, and that's why it is auth. So auth provider, we'll understand. Let's try to understand right now. Why to wait for other times. So this is very simple. If you know that what is use context and use state, you will be very much familiar that this is how we create a context so that it will be available to required components wherever it will be used. So this use context, we are simply setting this. This is to avoid importing both. So instead of you may not require to create this line for your case, but why I'm doing this, because when you use this, you will need this auth context there as well. So instead of that, what I'm trying to make it like, let's give it as a function, and we don't need to import auth context. Sorry, use context every time. So this use context is already present, and you just need to load this function, import this function, and you don't need to import use context. So every time you will have to import two functions if you don't use this line. It's up to you. Okay, so this line is not mandatory. I just written we can simply import just use context, where if you see this line, that where we need to auth context, that's it. So this is the initialization part, that what is the initial data we are going to provide to the user. If you see that initially we are saying that user is not logged in, JWT is not present, and new register is false, and app is still loading. This is the initial data we are going to provide to the components. Now this auth provider is nothing but is a component which will take a child component and then it will provide this data, whatever saying we are setting here in the value. So this auth context we have already created as a provider. We are using this, and when you return this as a provider and this provider has this value will be present to all the child component wrapped inside this auth provider. That's the logic. Now how we are setting this value, we have already understand this here, that what it is doing, that auth set auth context. This set auth context is setting all the is login JWT all values present here. So right now it is false. Here if you see, we are making it true, which means that user is logged in. That's how we are setting. So once whatever the value is provided here initially, that is present in for the first time. Later on, this app wrappers come into picture. It makes this login to true, and then this will be available. This value gets updated. The state gets updated, and that's how this value get updated, and that's how this updated value is present inside this children component, right? So this is the whole idea how this whole context is working. Now let's try to jump here. So now this, you know that auth provider, how data is provided, right? Auth wrapper, again, this is the same, this one, that how this gets data will be available to you. I mean, let's say this whole setting of process is still going on. Then what auth wrapper components does is it will show you the circular progress. Understand that? If you don't have this, you can merge this auth context and auth wrapper together if you want, but I just kept it separate for make it code more modular. So it's up to you. So this is this loading part. Here it will load. Here it will first provide the data, and while this is happening together, this will show the circular loading part while the initiation of the data is still happening. Now here, if you see, this is the hash router. We'll understand this hash router very easily, but this is basically, it is coming from, if you see, hash router is coming from React router DOM. Now this React router DOM, what it does, that if when anything inside this router component you have, that will be for handling all the routes. So you wrap this so that you'll be able to use this routes component. So if inside this hash router we are giving all the components inside that, so that those components will be able to navigate from to the different components. So whatever wrapped inside hash router, those components will be able to route to other pages. That's why we are routing everything inside this. Now my app bar is just the app bar, which you see this one. This is the app bar we are loading. So this app bar we are first trying to loading here, and it is also inside hash router because we are navigating via this click, right? So this navigation happens because of this. We'll learn this my app bar later on. It's very easy, but let's try to understand first other while we'll learn this while trying to understand all components. But let's try to first understand. So app bar we understood that what it is, and routes, let's see that what are the routes happening here. So this if the slash top hackers, when you click this top hackers, here it comes, right? That path is saying that if this is the path, then you go to private route. So if you see, this is not wrapped inside private route, because we are not saying that login for to just access login page, why you need a credential, right? So we'll simply show the login page. Same goes for register. But home page, if you see, this is also not wrapped. This is our home page. You don't need to log in. That's why we are not wrapping it private route. Same goes for not found. If there is nothing in the there is no match found inside that URL, then we are showing that this not found component. Now this private route and top hackers is the important right now. See, this is the route we are saying that, okay, if the URL path is top hackers, then the element we are going to have is private route to load, and that private route will load which component? This is the child component for private route. So private route component is having this child component inside it. So private route will decide whether this top hackers will be accessible to the user or not, depending on the login. So if this component finds the user is logged in, it will allow to load this top hackers. Otherwise, it will redirect to login page, as we have understood earlier. Alright, then we are done with our understanding on this app wrapper part, and then app.js we are also done. Now we will simply try to understand the all code, whatever we are saying here, all components in detail. So see you there. Thanks for watching, and please be with me. I hope you are still enjoying. Bye bye.